All right, continuing along our theme of why democracy is more successful in the long term than authoritarian systems. I'm going to kind of explain a little bit more about what I mean with the and the difference between inclusive and extractive institutions. In the previous video, I argued that there's this real break in history that we see in a number of countries, starting in northwestern Europe, but spreading outwards from there. It doesn't stay there forever. There's this real break in the relationship between income or prosperity and population. And democratic countries, democratic institutions and institutions that we associate with liberal political philosophy, what we call liberalism, a movement of institutions that creates a set of laws that allows people to really participate and create and benefit in a new system of prosperity in a way that was previously impossible. It's really this era of new institutions that is associated with this break. And I said, we want to think about the difference between inclusive institutions and extractive institutions. So I want to continue that discussion here. Now, one thing that people have often, will bring up as a counter argument is that, well, yes, they may say it's true that we do see, that democracies tend to be much more prosperous than authoritarian countries. But maybe that's because democracy is a result of prosperity. Maybe people who are wealthy and who are doing well and have good incomes are more likely to be democratic rather than the other way around, rather than the prosperity being a result of the democracy. And certainly I think there's a reasonable case to be made that being well off and having higher incomes makes it easier for a country to maintain or increase its democracy, the democratization that's present. But it just doesn't fit the facts that it's prosperity that's caused the democracy. In fact, what we tend to see is the opposite. One of the reasons is because democracies tend to have better institutions before they have the prosperity. What does that mean? Well, when we think about inclusive institutions, broadly, we're thinking about institutions that allow broad swaths of the population to participate in growth-oriented behavior. So things like property rights and the rule of law, public services that can facilitate market transactions, and things like creating public education systems that can educate citizens and allow them to participate in the market. Think about things like the rule of law that would allow protections for people who want to start new businesses. Imagine a society in which a new business idea is quickly eliminated because it might threaten someone who already is doing well. If you think about the United States, we have new businesses that are created all the time. And one of the things that happens is when new businesses come around, they can put old businesses out of business. Think about Amazon.com and Sears, the Sears Roebuck Company. Sears used to be one of the largest companies in America, and it was the largest retailer in America. They had stores everywhere. They had a mail order catalog that was by far one of the biggest of its kind in the world. But now Sears is very much in retreat, if not in bankruptcy very soon. A lot of its stores are shutting down, and Amazon.com is a big part of the reason. Amazon really provides a superior service, and the people who created it have gotten very wealthy. But I don't know about you, but I like Amazon. I use Amazon all the time. It's really convenient. Its prices are good. And it's just kind of nice to be able to shop online rather than having to go to the store every time I want something. So I'm glad that Amazon is there, and I'm glad that other institutions have been able to come along that can provide new services, even if in the process they may replace the older services. And this is kind of what we mean by inclusive institutions. You don't have to start out rich. You don't have to start out powerful. But anybody who is able to use their ideas and is able to translate that into new opportunity can benefit from that. Contrast that with a society in which maybe Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, is seen as a threat early on to the powerful people who run Sears, who may be politically connected, and who use that power to shut him out of opportunity, who use political connections to shut down Amazon in its early years. That's the kind of thing that happens in many countries. And when that happens, you may protect the people who are currently powerful, but you squash out the kind of growth that might have come through new innovation and new ideas. Imagine a society in which rather than investing in education for the people rather than investing in infrastructure and roads that all can use to get to their places of business or to get to school. Instead, the money was used to build palaces or to invest in the kinds of things that would simply benefit the people who are already well off. Well, in those kind of societies, you don't see the kind of growth-oriented behavior that you would want. Extractive institutions, on the other hand, look quite a bit different. Rather than being oriented towards long-term growth, extractive institutions look a lot like institutions that are oriented towards maintaining the current status of the current elite. You might think about the way that in some oil-rich countries, the oil is used to not facilitate further growth by investing in the population, but rather is used as a way to simply fund the current people who are in charge and to buy off support from the rest of the population to maintain that elite in its sort of permanent elite status. Extractive institutions are institutions that don't seek to allow for churning up and down, where some who are on the bottom can go up to the top, and some who are at the top may lose their position through competition. But rather, it looks like a place where the elite try to use their economic or political power to maintain a permanent place at the top. And that is not the kind of place where you're going to see long-term growth. Now, why are inclusive institutions more associated with democratic countries? In part because democracy allows for the creation of the kinds of institutions that will benefit a broader set of people. Authoritarian countries almost inevitably tend away from those kinds of things because the authoritarian ruler and his cronies and those people around him don't ever want to allow for the possibility of that churning mechanism to take them from the top to the bottom. And so by freezing the economy in its place and and doing the best that they can to extract resources from the rest of society, their hope is that they can draw rents to live off of rather than winning and benefiting from having produced something of value. And so that's one of the reasons why democracies tend to be more prosperous, is that the fact that people can hold elites accountable, or better able to hold elites accountable in democracies, helps to maintain the kinds of institutions that benefit ordinary people. Anybody who can get an education who can start a business could benefit, not just someone who might already be politically connected. To the degree that that's not true in the United States, to the degree that we might need a political connection, we might already need to be elite to do those things, then that would be a step away from those kinds of inclusive institutions, and we might expect prosperity to be harmed in the long term. So inclusive and extractive economic institutions are supported by political institutions. In other words, political institutions create the economic institutions that exist at the same time. We've talked about markets and states. You can think about it like this. States help to create the market. States help to shape the type of market that will exist. When I go to buy coffee at Starbucks, the Starbucks is there because it is able to be there. It's able to compete and to create a product that gets its investors rich, gets its owners rich, but also benefits me because now I have a coffee shop to go to. Extractive political institutions, we might think of like monarchies or tyrannies or dictatorships, don't want to allow for checks and balances. They don't want to disperse power widely. Rather, they want to concentrate power in the hands of very few without any kind of countervailing check and balance, without any ability to be limited by the rule of law. They want to be able to make arbitrary rules, to do anything that they want. And that's the kind of thing that will set up extractive economics institutions that prevent the kind of churning of up and down and broad-based participation in the economy that prosperity demands or needs. I have a video clip here that I'm going to post along with this lecture. It's a brief video clip that I want you to watch that's going to restate some of the things that I've just said and explain why economic inequality can weaken nations in the long term, because it can damage the potential for political equality. That economic inequality and political inequality can go hand in hand, and then when inequality becomes too great in one category, it makes it more likely that it will begin to emerge in the other category. So this is pretty good. I'm going to post that. I want you to take a look. But to kind of summarize where we're at, you might think of democracy and prosperity being linked by the kinds of institutions that they have. both democracies and democratic, inclusive economies churn up and down, and that the most democratic system of government is going to allow people to participate broadly, to become elected, to kick out the elites, to replace them with new people, with new blood, and with new ideas, and that everyone has a chance to participate. And the economies that are most prosperous are going to be the same way. And the most prosperous economies, everyone's going to have a chance to build a business. Everyone's going to have a chance to get an education. Everyone's going to have a chance to contribute to the kind of economy that we all benefit from. The opposite is one that rather looks like it's limited to a very small subset of people. And those subset of people will try to do everything in their power to prevent the kind of churn that could see them lose their relative place in the society. So, a phrase that sometimes is associated with liberal democracy, but also liberal capitalism, is creative destruction. And that is this referring to this churn that happens where there's a sort of pain that comes with as old industries and old businesses and old people, the people who are in, old places of privilege are, maybe lose out to a new generation or of people seeking opportunity and creating businesses. So it's painful as some lose their position, but that is part of the changing as the society moves towards new things. And we have to have a place that allows for that. Elites have to potentially lose their spot at the top of everything in order for everyone to benefit in the long term. But inevitably people don't want that. People who have privilege, people who have power, people who are elite want to stay that way. And they want their kids to be that way. So they spend, that's why, think about the way that people try to do everything that they can to maintain the spots, that they might, exist in for their kids, sending their kids to the very best schools, trying to find ways to make sure that their kids do well. That's natural. That's normal. But it can be taken to extremes. And you can imagine countries in which politicians or connected, powerful people use their ability to shape the rules to simply mandate that their group stay in charge. And that is something that we really worry about. When that starts to happen, when groups use their political or economic power to try to freeze that in place, then, and rather than creating innovation, et cetera, and, creating new things to become wealthy off of, they simply want to use the rules to extract rents from everybody else. That discourages innovation. It discourages broad participation. It incentivizes all the wrong kinds of behavior. And that is a big part of the reason why democracies outcompete in the long run any alternative, at least that we have seen so far.